This week I've made some decent progress, though less than I had hoped. For starters, I implemented the 3 characters that can join you this chapter alongside Anna, who got a whole video dedicated to her last week. Starting with Edwin, a pre-promoted ranger who automatically joins you at the beginning of the chapter, in the story serving as your guide through the already treacherous swamp that you end up navigating at night. His personal skill is Charge, increasing the damage dealt based on the distance moved before attacking, encouraging staying mobile and engaging in hit and run tactics, which to me just makes sense for a ranger. Then there is Francis, a priest. He's the second healer you get access to, since Alvis, the local Jagan, is a sage and therefore has access to staves, even if his time might be better spent annihilating the threats that others struggle with. Francis will appear as a green unit and will join you if you talk with him. And because he is someone who lived in that swamp and wandered it for quite some time, his personal skill is Strider, which is just renamed Acrobat, which in turn means that all traversable terrain always costs him 1 movement. And while we're talking about the priest, let's talk about his promotions too. In Sacred Stones, a priest can promote into a sage or a bishop, where the sage gets access to both anima and light magic, while bishop gets light magic and the slayer skill, meaning all his damage is effective against monsters. That would not work in the slightest in my ROM hack, since the vast majority of enemies are monsters, so I took away Bishop's Slayer, instead giving them Live to Serve as the class skill, meaning whenever they heal someone, they also regain health. And I completely replaced the Sage promotion option with a Warmonk, a class that wields staves and axes. Now, Warmonk by default is a less appealing option, since if you have a good magic stat, both light magic and staves benefit, where a Warmonk needs both good strength and magic to have the same effectiveness. So to balance it out, their class skill is Staff Savant, granting all staves a really valuable +1 maximum range. The final character that joins you this chapter, or rather after the chapter, is a young thief named Sol, because what is Fire Emblem without child soldiers? His personal skill is Opportunist, increasing his damage when attacking an enemy who cannot counter. And well, this character to me doesn't feel that interesting to discuss at the moment, seeing as he won't really get much of a chance to show his personality in this chapter. At least, he's not as interesting as what surrounds him, in terms of mechanics, which would be knives. Knives are a new weapon category that I implemented, currently exclusive to the thief and his promotions, mostly because there really aren't many classes that have knife animations on the graphics repository. Now I know that knives are a thing in some Fire Emblem games, but I haven't played or looked up those, so here's my implementation of that weapon type. They are all light, with very high accuracy and very low power. They lose the weapon triangle to all 3 melee weapon types, and win it against bows and other knives, because the optimal range for shanking someone is much smaller than for other melee weapons, and once you're within that range, you are just as susceptible to getting shanked yourself. Additionally, all of them come with Canto Plus, allowing you to move after attacking with them, making them less proper weapons and more something that you poke an enemy with while passing them by on the way to your actual target. Now I'm not fully satisfied with giving them regular Canto Plus, as it also allows the characters with knives equipped to move after other actions, such as trading or opening a chest. But changing that would require making a custom build for the skill system patch itself, and that's not something I'm going to even attempt until all the basics of the ROM hack are in place. There are 4 of the knives: a generic hunting knife, a throwing knife with 1 to 2 range, a rondel knife which is an armor slayer weapon, and a parrying knife, which is a river, meaning that it reverses all the weapon triangle interactions, making it an excellent defensive tool. The only reason these are called knives and not daggers, by the way, despite parrying dagger and rondel dagger being a thing, is that knife is a slightly shorter word. I've also done some work on the chapter itself, changing the terrain costs so that lake tiles, renamed to swamp, can be slowly trashed through by all non-mounted classes. And I just hope that it won't come back to bite me in the future chapters. I didn't plan on any of them having significant lakes, but who knows how things will develop. I also changed sand, renamed to mud, to make it work like desert in the vanilla game. Because despite what it may look like, this is in fact a desert map in terms of its design, featuring such classics as difficult terrain, limited visibility, and hidden treasures. The hidden treasures in particular being given an original flavor to make it at least somewhat distinct from actual desert maps. That flavor being will-o-wisps. Green units which will appear and disappear around the places where the treasures can be found, replacing the bonds which serve as an indicator on the desert maps. But they will also serve a secondary function, being given the same range of vision in darkness as thieves, and as such revealing parts of the map wherever they appear. They also will have a bit of a nasty surprise for those who come to claim their treasures, as well as a special interaction with the village you're able to visit in this chapter. And I have added some new enemies to be introduced in this chapter. In addition to this being the first one with bonewalkers wielding horse-slayer weapons, there will also be 2 new enemy classes. Drowned, which are wielders of anima magic and staves, and which for obvious reasons are extremely fast in water but slow on land, and, appearing as an optional secondary boss, a Gore, which you can think of as a tier 3 Revenant. A metric ton of hit points, next to no defense, but unlike Revenants and Entombed, this one is deceptively fast. Because just look at this animation. And while you're at it, look at these animations. Someone named Alex Splode made them all, and they are some of my absolute favorites out of the ones on the repository. Are any of these other animations related to this ROM hack? Not at all. But despite having basically no reach, seeing as I consider a video reaching double-digit view count a success, I still want to shout out the people who make things I like. That tangent aside, to give the player a way to fight the Gore, even if no one can hope to survive facing it head-on, I'm giving it, the boss specifically, not the class in general, the Fury skill. That means it gets a bonus to its stats, but loses HP after every combat, making chipping away at it from a safe distance a more viable option. And that is something I'm trying to do for the bosses in this ROM hack. Make them more than just big bundles of stats. Each of them is given a skill, which I hope makes them a more unique challenge. The prologue boss, for instance, Nylov, has the Tomebreaker skill, which reduces the accuracy of tomes against him by 50%, and increases his own accuracy against tome users by 50% as well. Meaning that your 2 starting characters, being a Mage Lord and a Sage, will struggle to hit him, but be easily hit in return. Alvis, the Jagan that he is, can actually win semi-reliably, but there is of course an easier way, that being recruiting your first ally, who happens to be an archer named Reuter, and being an archer, he has no trouble with that boss. The second chapter's boss is an archer himself, and serves as that chapter's timer of sorts. Since you are able to gain access to the arena in this chapter, I didn't want the player to be able to grind indefinitely. So at one point Vexalif arrives, and the chapter ends when you defeat him. No big deal, you might say. Just don't kill him. But if you don't kill him, he will kill you, being fairly high level and wielding both a poison bow and a longbow, which gives him this kind of map presence. But he's still an archer. He can't attack in melee, you might then reason. Just surround him. And yes, that would be a viable way of stalling him indefinitely, which I didn't want, so that's where his personal skill comes in. And no, it's not point blank, which lets him use bows in range 1, that would be boring, and also force him to choose one of the nearby targets should the player try to surround him. Instead he has pass, allowing him to just move through the spaces your units occupy, and making it so no one can escape him for long. Finally, Morayon, who makes an appearance at the beginning of chapter 1, but leaves before you can fight him, has the self-descriptive skill of Tome Range +1, which I decided to give him because when you do fight him, he will be stationary. As such, if he didn't have an extended range tome, he would be in the same situation as a vanilla general boss who forgot to pack a javelin, as bow users could shoot him from a safe distance. As I said in the beginning, I've done a somewhat decent amount, but definitely less than I wanted. That is because of a couple reasons. For one, FE Builder crashed on me at one point, forcing me to re-implement the map changes and the knives. So here's your daily reminder. Save your work and save it often. It's almost always just a key shortcut away, and the one time it does save you an hour or 2 of work, will more than make up for this minor inconvenience. And I've also run into a bit of a writer's block when setting up the intro cutscene, specifically struggling to create the personality for Edwin the Ranger. These two things resulted in me missing the goal of completing this chapter midway through this month, but that's just me complaining. Writer blocks are temporary and FE Builder cooperates most of the time. So I just need to get back to work and hope that once again this week will be better than the last. So subscribe if you want to see how it goes, and for now, farewell.